So the title is, so this is about genomic medicine Sweden, which is a rather new initiative in Sweden, which we will hear about. We have chosen, or they have chosen, to focus on rare disease and cancer, and many of you know that now with the next generation sequencing, and we try to divide cancer into subgroups, actually many of the cancer types are rare diseases. So we will focus on the challenge to engage the whole chain, from scientists to clinicians to innovators to industry and finally to the patients. And this is, of course, very important as patient groups become smaller and smaller. So I will start, though, to say that although Sweden is a small country, we also have problems with the national collaboration and the coordination. But there are very hopeful plans in Sweden now, because of the beginning of the year, we have actually a life science office directly under the government. And we decided to start with the first speaker then, who's going to talk about the challenges that a small country like Sweden has in trying to coordinate all this and to bring together all the, the academy, industry, healthcare sector, and so on. So the first speaker is Jenni Nordborg. So she works at the Swedish Innovation Agency, but from the beginning of this year, she's also coordinator, the national coordinator for the office. So please, Jenni.
Thank you. So we start with the challenges from the top, which is actually coordinating within the government. And is the pointer, everybody seemed to find the pointer except me. This is the pointer, yes. So excellent. So the Swedish government has had life sciences as a high priority for the last period. And definitely in collaboration, we've had a strategic innovation partnership program from the government side together with industry, academia, and healthcare, and also patients at the table. And what has become really clear is that we also, in order to work with policy development, we need to take a new mandate also within the government to actually be able to coordinate the strategies between the different ministries. So the Office for Life Sciences has been set up to actually work as a cross-function between the Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Research and Education, and Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation. So I work for all these three ministers, which is of course a challenge, but it's also a very engaging work. The state secretaries are my steering committee in the work, and that has actually been able to start to move towards a new culture shift that we really need to see. So this leadership is, of course, extremely challenging, but also something that we probably need to see to be able to take in the challenge as we're working on with this systemic transformation within this field. And the first task that we're taking on is developing a new life science strategy for Sweden. In order to do so, we've published a roadmap for life sciences. Now, this is not the starting point for the strategy, but it's an invitation for a dialogue, mainly nationally, but also internationally, because in order to form a national strategy that we can actually have leverage from, it needs to be a new type of partnership from the government side, together with the regions and the municipalities that mandate the healthcare side, together with the professions and with all the different professions, together with industry and academia, but also having the public's expectation on the new systemic transformation where we need to go. So this is a movement that we have really started on, but in order to set a goal, I do believe that a national strategy can really point out a new direction where we can follow up where we stand, where we're going, and really to see the next priorities that we need to set. Because I think that one of the important tools in actually having a strategy is you need to prioritize. You need to prioritize what you should do first, where you should put your investments, and where you should really focus on policy development. So, and in order to do so, we have taken a very holistic and long-term perspective. That is probably needed. If we are going to see any changes at all, we have to say, take a 10-year perspective. Is that the perspective of ICPerMed? I definitely hope so, because we really need to see the whole systemic changes in this field. We need to focus on systems innovation, not innovations in the silos, but all across the systems, which really, and I think that so many of the examples that you've been showing today really gives us hope that there's so many things going on, but we probably need to coordinate more in order to have some leverage. But it also, in order to do so, of course, we need to constantly work with new knowledge and new competence development, and I think that we all face with that struggle in our daily basis. What are the competencies that we need 3 years from now? We don't really know that, and how do we continue with the development of knowledge? What we do know, however, is that in order to make the systemic change, we need to really have a co-creation with the patient, with the individuals. That is sort of where we need to answer to in the future. And also, if we really work this transition, we will be able to move not just to focus on care and precision and personalized medicine in that as a whole, but more towards personalized health, to focus more on both prevention and also rehabilitation, really to close the loop on that. And from a Swedish perspective, that is, of course, where we see that we can have our international attractiveness in collaboration, and where we also can find our next generation strengths. The life science sector is extremely important to Sweden. It's 10% of our exports. It's the industry in Sweden that has the highest value added. So, of course, it's extremely important. But where do we find our next generation strengths? That's, of course, a key challenge. So we've set 3 priority areas that we really want to, and that you all been that is clear really to all of you. It's the same priority areas everywhere, but as a founding platform, what we really need to set up is an efficient use of health data. So what we come from in Sweden, we have the unique innovation, which is the personal identification numbers. So that's the baseline why we can track all people, not all inhabitants of Sweden, but all that are born in Sweden. So not the 90%, not the 10% that are in the Swedish biobank. So all can be tracked since 1970. We have the quality registers. We've been all electronic journals. We've been having that for the last 10 years. Of course, that's a giant pool of qualitative knowledge. But if we don't extract that with an efficient use, we will not be able to leverage on that. So that's a challenge for Sweden, that we have the knowledge base, but we don't really have the coordination and the speed now to be able to make use of that, to connect that with the patient data. We do see a lot of examples where we're using real-world data and real-world evidence, but we need to see that to become the practice for the future. So I think that if we, and that stands for Europe as a whole, if we don't work on more efficient use of the data as a whole, we will not be able to work the transformation towards personalized medicine. And the second priority that we set up is, of course, to work on a more individualized and precision medicine paradigm, where we do see that the future diagnosis, therapy, and cure are game changers in this field. And here we definitely want to prioritize two things: setting up the infrastructure that can be really efficient, and work on the true policy issues that we're facing. I'm very happy to be able to announce today that we are this morning we took a decision on funding the next level of the rollout of genomics medicine in Sweden, and we have the presentation here soon. And that is a collaboration with the funding from the Swedish government through the Swedish Innovation Agency and all the university hospital. So we will be able to have a complete outreach on genomics medicine in Sweden. But that, of course, then we will face completely new challenges when it comes to policy development, ethics, integrity, security, etc. I think that is the platform that we need to discuss more. Apart from the personal identification numbers, one of the true assets that we have in Sweden is the Swedish public. So we have a huge trust base. In the last review, 95% of the Swedish public really want to donate the data when they understand what it's all about. So we need to be able to keep up with the aspirations of that speed and still be able to do that in a secure environment. But so from the first two priorities, the efficient use of health data and personalized and precision medicine, what we really are looking at in the future is a new paradigm where in the future care chain, research and innovation needs to be integrated throughout the chain, not only within the home care and social care, but also with the self-care and care management. We need to work on much more on the medical decision making throughout the chain, and really having the healthcare sector as innovation engines in the forefront, but also looking more on the public and the patient perspective of where we want to go. And I think that this is the true transition that we should be also addressing, not only on the diagnostics and the side, but to see how we will include the new paradigm of research, innovation, and development throughout the whole society. And with that, I will conclude just with a thank you note. The roadmap can be downloaded from the government's website, and we look forward to having dialogues with all of you, especially, of course, that when you have cross functions within ministries or thinking about that, that's something that we definitely want to start with a collaboration on really from this day, but also to see where we can put the priorities together for the future. Thank you.
So thank you, Jenni. We move on. So I don't allow any questions now because we're actually going to have a panel discussion here at the end. So we move on to, this was the policy perspective, and now it's time for the patient perspective. And then I invite Fabian Bolin and Sebastian Hermelin. I think Fabian is going to start. They are co-founders of a very fascinating and interesting company called WarOnCancer. Please.
Right. I'm going to start with asking a question. So please raise your hand if you've ever heard the phrase involving the patients. We suspected as much. So we're very fortunate to be able to attend a lot of healthcare conferences and health tech conferences. And there seems to be a general trend that the words we need to involve the patients often occur. You see healthcare professionals, hospital executives, innovation leaders talk about the importance of making the patient taking an active role in the treatment. The patient needs to become more informed and perhaps even to take charge of their own treatment process. We talk about the necessity of enabling the patient to see the whole treatment schedule digitally and analyze data and so on and so forth. And don't get me wrong, I think it's great that healthcare is starting to understand the power of including the patients. However, I think there's a danger in assuming that involving the patients is enough. There's a danger in assuming that involving the patients is a solution to the whole problem for patients, because it's not. It only scratches the surface of a much more deeply rooted problem, and it's the fact that patients and their families are often suffering from depression. I know for myself, I'm a cancer patient, and in December last year, I finished 900 days of chemotherapy for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. One way of coping with it was through the sharing of my story in a blog. The sharing also made me realize the value and power of storytelling. But I was fortunate enough to survive, and as you can see, the body has its own healing mechanism. It's the mind that takes most of the damage, and yet not a single nurse or doctor has ever asked me the question, how do you feel? Now, I don't blame anyone personally. It's not like I think like doctors or nurses are less empathetic people. Probably the opposite. But the problem is of a structural nature, and it comes from within the healthcare. The problem is that mental health is being overlooked. Now, if we, instead of these, on these stages, if we instead of asked ourselves, how can we involve the patients more, if we dared to ask the real question, which is how can we boost mental health for people affected by cancer, it would lead to a much more interesting conversation. One that would probably start with, what is mental health, really? And secondly, should it be the healthcare's responsibility to deal with mental well-being for patients and families, or should they rather work together with a third-party solution to tackle the problem? Now, I'm the CEO and co-founder of such a solution, and it's called WarOnCancer. We're a health tech company on a mission to improve mental health for everyone affected by cancer. And we're currently developing the social network for patients, survivors, and loved ones. A niche community for cancer, or if you want, a new Facebook for cancer. By uniting the patient community at large, we're in a unique position to collect and provide patient-reported data. Data that we can work with together with healthcare, the pharmaceutical companies, as well as academia and research. Now, I'm not going to walk you through a demo of the platform, but we're currently beta testing together with our first users, and this is the third iteration of the platform. But I'm going to walk you through the main features. The first being the ability to share your journey or follow others. Storytelling is and will always be a core element of the platform. The ability to share your health data and understand and track your impacts, something that Sebastian will talk more about. The ability to share knowledge and learn from others. And the knowledge that you are not alone. Connect with people on a global level, with people that understand what you're going through. So these are the social elements of the platform. Now I'm going to leave it to my business partner and friend, Sebastian, to talk about the data and co-creation.
Thank you. So I have the best and worst world in the industry, I think. I get to do what I love, and I get to work towards a change, but I always have to take the stage after Fabian. That's why I have a picture that doesn't even look like me. And thank you, Jenni. I'm looking forward to some of that government sponsorship as well. I can remember the day almost, or roughly 3 years ago, when Fabian texted me saying that basically I have bad news. I got blood cancer, I got leukemia. And it still affects me, obviously. I remember the sensation of wanting to throw up, because I assumed that blood cancer is the most lethal form of cancer. And by doing so, I assumed that my best friend was going to die. Now, assuming this was obviously wrong, because we're here together, but it also made me realize that we live in a world where cancer affects a lot of people in a very, very negative way. Taking me as an example, it was really hard for me to be a good friend, a supportive friend, because I even remember when I asked Fabian, how are you doing? And he said, I feel strong today, I'm feeling great, to be honest. I remember tilting my head, asking him again, how do you really feel? Because I was expecting another answer. It was only through reading Fabian's blog that I could realize what he was going through and how I could be a more supportive friend. And the fact of the matter was, Fabian only wanted to be treated as a normal human being, as Fabian, not as a victim and not as a patient. And I think we all can learn something from that. So Fabian has already told you about the power of a social network, how sharing his story helped him, and how reading his story actually helped me. Now I'm going to take you through the concept of data sharing, patient-reported data, and how we incentivize our users to share their data with you in the room. We've talked to a lot of big industry players, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, healthcare systems, healthcare providers, and everybody witnesses about the same thing. Basically that it's a burden and it's a problem and it's hard to get their hands on patient-reported data. Patient-reported data that could otherwise be useful. And meanwhile, we have research showing that patients are interested in not only sharing their data, but will happily do so if they understand their impact. So we have taken this to heart, and what you see on the screen is a concept that we call gamification of altruism. It's unique in the way that it allows our users, our members, our patients to transparently track who uses their data, when, and most importantly, for what purpose. As you can see, we work together with some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and they are as excited as we are about making this a reality. So how do we work with pharmaceutical companies? I'm going to walk you through this really quick. Basically, we're working towards making an impact, and we can make an impact by allowing pharmaceutical companies to better understand the needs of patients through targeted surveys, through insights and reports, and we're working with a big vision in mind to be able to match-make clinical trials with eligible patients that can not only save lives short-term and long-term, but that can also spearhead the pharmaceutical R&D process. When it comes to healthcare partnerships, that's a tougher nut to crack, if we put it that way, especially when you have state-sponsored hospitals, state-owned. But we're lucky enough to work with some of the biggest hospitals in Sweden, and we're working towards making WarOnCancer a prescription. And I could talk more about, and I want to talk more about what we do and how we aim to achieve these goals, and we're happy to talk with you afterwards as well. But I want to end on another note, because WarOnCancer is more than just a technical platform, and it's more than just collecting patient-reported data. It's about inspiration and hope, and making patients feel like humans again.
Cancer, it is incapable of any form of reasoning, and it grows stronger because we fear it. Going through cancer is an extremely lonely process. When I got diagnosed, I completely broke down, but I decided to post a message on Facebook to let my friends and family know. Hello, my friends, family, and followers. On the 1st of July, I was diagnosed with leukemia. For those of you who are not familiar with this term, it's blood cancer. The post was shared 13,000 times. I discovered there is a power in us sharing our stories. Sharing creates energy. Each story you read about reaffirms you're not alone. We have created the storytelling platform WarOnCancer.com for everyone who has their lives touched by cancer. Our mission is simple: to make the world a better place for future generations of cancer warriors. This is the time when we can all come together and feel safe knowing that we are not alone in the fight.
For my friend.
Det här är för mina kusiner.
Pelo meu irmão.
Okay, das ist für meine Freunde in Hamburg.
För min vän.
هذا حق أمي.
Jean Baby.
Para el hijo de mis vecinos.
Det här är för min vän.
Det här är för min vän.
This is for my grandfather.
وانا عايشاني. Para minha tia.
För min farmor och farfar.
For my grandmother.
Para meu camarada.
För min onkel. For my uncle.
Esto es para mi tía.
For my friend.
This is for my friend's dad.
هذا حق ربعنا.
За подругу.
Для моего любимого человека, моего мужа.
For myself.
This is a platform for all of us, because in the war on cancer, we are more powerful together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian and Sebastian, for this, at the same time, touching story, the power of patient innovations. It's fantastic. We will move on to the company perspective. And I'm not going to say very much, but of course, if you work in the area of rare disease and subgroups of cancer, there is a challenge to have the companies and the pharmaceutical industry on board. So the next speaker is Joachim Reichel, who works at AstraZeneca. So,
good afternoon, and I couldn't agree more that inspiration is absolutely key to whatever we do. I would now like to turn our attention to the pharmaceutical industry and what can we do to support the war on cancer. And coming back to the topic of inspiration, we have a challenge in the pharmaceutical industry when we look about success rates of our projects. As you can see here, the overall success rate of a drug project from preclinical stage to successful phase 3 is 4 to 5%, which is not very inspiring. So at AstraZeneca, we took a step back and looked, why is it? Can we identify the driving factors that differentiate a successful project from an unsuccessful project? And this is how we came up with this, what we call the 5R framework. The right target, the right tissue, the right safety, the right patient, and the right commercial potential. So when those 5 R's are in place, there's a much higher likelihood for a project to succeed. What we did now, we rigorously applied this 5R principle in all our portfolio decisions and see what happened. We could drive, or could sort of change from a 4% success rate within 5 years to almost 20% success rate. This, I think, is inspiring, and we would like to go further than that. And pertaining to the topic that we have today, precision medicine or personalized medicine, especially the right target and the right patient are directly linked to it. Let's start with the right target. So again, when we look into what nature were the targets of successful drug projects, we could see that they have a strong genetic link to the disease. And those targets, or those projects with these genetically linked targets, are have a much higher likelihood to succeed than when the drug target is not only marginally linked to the disease. And that allows us, sort of with genetics, allows us to really identify innovative drug targets, which then give a segue into designing the right clinical trials by selecting the right patients and eventually deliver better medicine faster. And we've already heard this morning an example about osimertinib, where we exactly followed this process. So from day one, we knew essentially which patients to treat because we understood the mechanism of resistance in lung cancer for this specific patient population. And as a consequence, we could develop osimertinib in less than 3 years from first in man to regulatory approval, which is quite stunning compared to traditional development timelines. And this is why we put a lot of emphasis on genetics now. So we set out to analyze 2 million genomes, and 500,000 of these genomes will actually come from our clinical trials in order to exactly do this, understand the biology of the disease. That is and must be the starting point. Then, with this understanding, identify new targets, eventually supporting the selection of patient clinical trials. So there's an immediate segue into personalized medicine and then delivering those personalized medicines to patients. So from a drug R&D process, one really needs to start early, already with the target selection process, to implement and to think along those lines of personalized medicine. And we really took it seriously. So currently, approximately 90% of our portfolio is actually following a personalized or precision medicine approach because of what we've learned from the past, because of those 5R principles. And I already alluded to the importance of genetics. However, it's not only genetics. We're also interested in other biomarkers, as long as there's a clear link between the biomarker and the disease. So as a consequence of that, this strategy has paid off. So we have obtained 26 diagnostic approvals linked to 5 medicines. And these are just, here's some examples. As you can see, most of them have already been mentioned. Gefitinib and osimertinib, olaparib, a PARP inhibitor, and durvalumab in the immuno-oncology space. Why do we need so many different tests? Why is it not sufficient to have only one test? Because again, we need to personalize this. Not every lung cancer patient can give a biopsy. So this is why, in addition to a biopsy test, we also developed a plasma test. And not every hospital has access to every type of technology platform. So we need to diversify in order to ensure that the highest number of patients have access to diagnostic testing. So what's next? I think we need to build this ecosystem where, rather than working in silos, we're working together collaboratively. And in the very beginning, it's really the idea to test every patient and to test the patient with a high-quality test. The test results need to be trustworthy and fit for clinical decision-making. And you could say, well, what's the point? Well, we still see, even in Europe, that there are countries, when we start with a new test, that the testing rates initially are as low as 40% or maybe even lower. And it takes months, sometimes years, to get them to 80%. And this is really lost time, valuable time lost. In addition, when we think about the diagnostic journey a patient undertakes, it's important to have this early on in the process, because the earlier you understand the disease, the better you can treat them afterwards. We've already discussed at this conference a lot about data, and yes, that's absolutely key. Imagine if we had every cancer patient sequenced, and this would allow us to set up platform trials, clinical trials, much faster than when we have to develop tests first. And also in the sense of a continuously learning healthcare system. So if you build these databases with real-world evidence, and we can see actually what happens to patients also once a drug is on the market in terms of the safety and the efficacy profile, and also pick up resistance early, which then allow us to bring this information back into the R&D process and develop the next generation of medicines. So with that, I think we really need to develop this patient-centric ecosystem to create a win-win situation for the patient and for the healthcare systems. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we move on to the actually Genomics Medicine Sweden. So we will have two speakers. So one is Rickard Rosenqvist, who is the head of Genomic Medicine Sweden. He's also professor of clinical genetics at Karolinska. And Anna Wedell, who is a senior physician at Karolinska University Hospital and also professor at Karolinska in medical genetics, I think. Yeah. And you changed the order, so Anna will start to talk about the clinical implementation, and then you, Rickard, will continue. So please.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So I will, actually, this will be a little bit different. So we will move from cancer into rare inherited diseases. And it's a little bit of a challenge to do this in 10 minutes, but I will do my best. And what I will tell you is how we actually implemented this into the clinic in a very bottom-up approach, actually before the national initiative was launched. So it's more sort of the background, how we did it to start with. And we did it, as I said, bottom-up and as a sort of a proof of concept in one disease area, which is the metabolic diseases. So I had a center for inborn errors of metabolism. You may know that there are maybe 10,000 monogenic disorders in humans, and about 10% will be metabolic, and that's the patient group that we work with. So a little bit of a background. What are the patients that are affected with these disorders, sort of our responsibility? Well, they are very different. There are about 1,000 different rare diseases that affect biochemistry in the body. And a large group of these patients will be small children who are born healthy, but then they crash when they are on their own because the mother's metabolism protects them during pregnancy. So they will end up in the intensive care unit among all the babies who have other things, and we need to find those few with metabolic disorders. There can also be energy deficiency with very weak muscles, for instance. But then we have patients with very gradual disease onsets, like storage in different organs, and the brain is most vulnerable to these imbalances. So much of our job is to save brain function, prevent brain damage, because the brain cannot repair itself once it's damaged, of course. But in addition, we have lots of adult patients. We have a strong interest in mitochondria, and those disorders, they strike anywhere in the body and any time during life. Sudden blindness in the young adult, for instance. And many of these disorders can be treated if we find them, and there's a very intense development of new treatments because metabolism is dynamic, so you can intervene if you know what's wrong. So you need to have the biology of the disease. So you can understand that this is quite challenging. The patients turn up all over healthcare. They don't come nicely sorted into different, neurology or pediatrics. They're everywhere. So we try to meet this challenge, and that's how we built our center. And this is now pre-genomics. We built this center based on this need before genomics. So we have a cross-disciplinary organization, so we are sorted into the lab in the hospital, but my doctors are laboratory medical people. I'm a clinical geneticist, and we have chemists, but the majority are experienced clinicians, pediatricians, neurologists, endocrinologists, working with patients in the hospital and in the center. So they do both. And we have this holistic approach. We take complete responsibility of this disease group. So rather than working according to specialty, we work solving the problems for these patients together. So we do a lot of biochemical investigations and genetics, and I'll come to the genomics in a minute, for diagnostics, but also for following patients through life, because these are often treatable disorders. We have a strong focus on the mitochondria. We do small muscle biopsies, and we have very detailed biochemical investigations that we can really pinpoint what's wrong in these patients, and we have then prepared live mitochondria from our patients. We do the neonatal screening, so every baby is born in Sweden has a blood test, mailed in regular mail to our laboratory, and it's not just PKU, which is the disease it started with about 50 years ago, but today it's 24 different treatable disorders, and this is also expanding. There are WHO criteria for which disorders should be included, and there's a system for expansion, so this is growing. And we're about 10 million people, so we have about 115,000 babies every year. We have a registry, so we follow all babies that we diagnose all through life, from birth, before symptoms. we monitor biochemistry so we can monitor their dietary treatment, for instance in PKU, so we can measure their amino acids, and we even report to the school kitchen so they can adjust treatment. And this is in fact very individualized medicine before genomics, that we follow each patient. So ideally they should never become ill. And the only thing that differs between a PKU person from another person is the diet, if it's done properly. And when they become pregnant, we manage them even more closely so their babies are born healthy. So we really take the complete responsibility here. And in addition, we have a basic science lab, because now that we can do genomics, we really find so many new variants that need to be functionally tested in the basic science setting. So we integrate that as well in the metabolic area. So that's our approach. And before I became head of this clinic, I was very much involved in building SciLife Lab in Sweden, in Stockholm in particular, which is it's a center for high-throughput biology with the focus of improving health and environment. And this is an academic initiative, and healthcare in Sweden is not state academics, it's the municipality, which is a little bit of a problem to work across these different systems. So I work in the hospital on the other side, but I was scientific director for this institute in Stockholm with the only purpose of getting it into healthcare. So we built a dedicated facility to be able to take on patient samples and not mix them with the research samples. We have dedicated staff and facilities and computer clusters only for patient samples, but we use the same instruments as the big genomic center. So of course, when you do a whole genome analysis in one patient rather than in groups, you have to be very careful and you have to work very differently from a research protocol, of course. So we have spent several years on developing systems to do this in a very stringent and quality assured way, and only address what the patient actually needs to know and sort of ask the big data the right question for the right patient. So the way we do this is that we do a whole genome in each patient. We get lots of data, but then we have built ways of extracting what is relevant. So we have a database of all known genes that are proven disease-causing in our responsible area, in the metabolic area. And currently there are about 900 such genes. And then we continuously curate this database. And this is, of course, where our team comes in, because we need to decide when should we do this, what questions should we ask the data, how should we interpret it, because it's difficult to understand all of this data. But if you have the multidisciplinary approach, we have all the biochemistry, and you have all the doctors who know when to do it and also how to understand the data and immediately act on it, then you can do it. And that's why the metabolic area is ideal to start with. HPO here is that we can also enter phenotype terms, that's symptoms. So we can do a genome and ask the data, do you have any variant that seems to fit with the patient's symptoms? So this is not fully developed yet because the databases aren't perfect yet, but we are getting it into place. And then, of course, if we don't find anything in known genes, then that's when we lift the filters, and that's when we make discoveries, and that's where we need to go to the basic science lab and prove that we have found the right thing. And this may take years for each new disorder, whereas this has to be a very rapid track. And this also requires, of course, information and informed consent, whereas this is a very quick thing because you really don't have time here. So it's a way of really taking care of both of these situations. So to do this, we have a little programming team. We do everything in-house because when we started, there was nothing. So we have Henrik who leads this initiative, and he's made a system of ranking all the variants according to disease-causing potential, and we can do it very quickly. We have quality tools, and importantly, we have a visualization tool. So we present all the data to the clinical team, so you don't need to know the technology, but you need to know the biology to really act on the data. And also we have put a lot of effort into sharing, so we can build teams and share data between teams. And this doesn't show, it's supposed to be blue, but everything is open source. We are very, very for sharing and collaborating. That's how we built the whole system. And that's why it works so well. So what we have done is that we've built together from the hospital using the infrastructure at SciLife Lab, and then we are building the software, and it's continuously being updated. and we are building complementary teams. So the idea is to break up all these silos in the different clinics. So we have, as a broad basis, we have clinical genetics, but they now work together with a dedicated team. So I am a metabolic dedicated team. So we have the genetics, and then we have complementary teams. We're now building an immunology team for immunodeficiencies, etc. So in unclear patients, we can do what we're best at, and we're really, really good at that. And if we suspect something else, we can call our colleagues, and they can open their gene lists, etc. So we can really, really work in a very community-like way. And this is really, it has been very much a matter of building a creative environment when everyone works together in a community way. And we have computer scientists working with the clinicians and mathematicians, etc. So we have done about 4,000 rare disease samples, and we started with genomes in 2015, swapping from exomes. And you can see the need is really growing, and the turnaround times are quick, so we can do quick genomes. And in the metabolic track, we've done about 800 patients, and we've solved almost 300, and all of them are almost different. And this is a game changer, because suddenly now we have families who used to be unexplained. Suddenly we have hundreds of different diagnoses that can be treated. So for our pediatricians, this is a totally new medicine. It's really a transformation. And it would never work unless we had this community way of working with these complementary teams. I will give you one case because it's hard to really get a flavor of this. This is a family where one boy was born, he was fine, but then he developed lethargy, and when he became ill, he stopped eating, developed seizures, and on MRI, he had characteristic lesions in his deep nuclei in his brain, and then he died. And he got the diagnosis of an acute necrotizing encephalitis, which is a complication of an influenza virus, which he could have had. And he actually did have the virus, but many of our patients actually present when they have a stress, perhaps because of an infection, for instance. So it wasn't until his younger brother was born, and the same thing started to happen when we were contacted, because they realized that this was something else. So then we had our system up and running, so we could in 4 days find 2 mutations in a gene. And this is, if you know the biochemistry, if you know everything around it, you just need to see this from a genome presented in the system to be diagnostic, so it's a sort of an immediate hit. And this is a treatable disease. It's called biotin-responsive basal ganglia disease. And these are vitamins that are cofactors for enzymes in the brain. So when he was in a coma, slipping away, he was treated, and this is when he wakes up hungry. And you can imagine having 300 patients suddenly just diagnosed quickly. It totally changes medicine. And everything is not that dramatic, but just the possibility of now finding 10,000 different disorders quickly, it really changes everything. But we are not really ready for it, because you cannot just push out this data. You need to have this really, really established environment to take care of it. So we have a big job of doing it without cutting corners and building these teams. So we are ready, but we are very few, and we are struggling. And healthcare is on its knees, and it's really not as simple as that may sound to work across these barriers. We're also finding a lot of new diseases that are giving us new biology on how the brain works, and we have found new treatments, but I don't have time to show you that. So in conclusion, it's a dramatic time. It totally changes everything, and we are really saving lives, and it's a totally new landscape of these rare diseases. There are many more, and they're all different. So we have huge opportunities to find these patients where there is known treatment, where we haven't had a chance before because we haven't found them. But we also find new biology, new pathways that are relevant for common disorders. We know, for instance, that mitochondria is involved in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but we don't know how. Now we can start understanding that using the rare diseases as proof of concept, find the biomarkers and find the treatments, etc. We already have some examples of that. But it's all about integration, sharing data, working together, focusing on the problem rather than on your area of expertise. So it really has to change. As Jenni said, there has to be a system change and a transformation, but it's very rewarding. And I should also say that you can, of course, scale this concept. We scale it in the hospital, so we share data. You can do it nationally, find the experts, network with experts. you can do it on an international scale, and it fits very nicely with the ERN networks and all these initiatives that are being made. So this is sort of a bottom-up way of fitting into these other initiatives. And now you will hear Rickard present the national initiative. So we have then formed a unit in Stockholm. This has grown into a genomic medicine center at Karolinska, which will be a part of the Genomic Medicine Sweden, which is then the national initiative. That will be described by Rickard. Thank you very much.
So it's great to be here, and also, of course, it's a great day for us because we have just been awarded the funding for the next phase of genomic medicine today at 11 o'clock. So we need to we need to celebrate that in some way, yes. So we, as you have seen today, and as you know, we have a fantastic toolbox. As a geneticist, this is the golden age of a geneticist. Having said that, I think that an appropriate comment that was asked before or pointed out before, it's not only genomics. There are many different layers of information that are important in order to realize precision medicine. But we can start with genomics. And for me, it's amazing that we, as Anna has showed you, we use clinical whole genome sequencing in routine healthcare. And as a geneticist, I would never have dreamt about this 5-10 years ago. So how did we start with this initiative? As Anna already alluded to, Science for Life Laboratory is the government's sort of investment into high throughput technologies. And one of the national platform is dedicated to diagnostics development. And through this platform, we have 4 clinical genomics units in Sweden at 4 university hospitals. And we started to collaborate and to develop NGS tests from gene panels to whole genome sequencing. And we have actually been working since 2013 as a team. And this is at all these sites is a collaborative effort between SciLife Lab, the university, and the university hospital. And after a while, we felt that why don't go national and invite? It's relatively easy in Sweden because we have only 7 university hospitals. So we asked them, and they said, yes, let's do that. So our ambition is really that we want all patients to have access to the same type of diagnostic using next generation sequencing technologies. In order to realize precision medicine. And we think from day one, we want to deliver diagnostics, as Anna has showed, and myself, I've been working a lot with leukemia diagnostics. So when delivering diagnostics, this will create a national database, and Sweden are good at registers and population-based analysis. So this will give an added dimension, which will be a national resource that is sort of the base for further innovation and development of new drugs and new techniques, etc. So we will not start from scratch. We have SciLife Lab that has provided us with the technology framework, and also we have had dedicated clinical genomics units. We also have a national biobank, Biobank Sweden, national registers, and we think that this, if we can work together in a good way and sort of connect the different data types, as Jenni was discussing, this can be a really, really, I think when we reach that stage, genomic medicine Sweden will really can deliver. So we will focus on the effort that Anna has made on and his team on whole genome sequencing. So we aim to go national, so to say, with whole genome sequencing. For cancer, we have been using gene panels through the clinical genomics unit. So on all university hospitals, we now do gene panel diagnostics, and we counted last year that 50% of lung cancer patients now have a gene panel sequenced. Of course, that is not enough, but still, we are happy that that a large proportion have access to it. So we are also now, within the cancer area, there are, of course, we know that the next stage will be more broad gene sequence, and I will show you some examples later on. So the timeline, we initiated this 2.5 years ago, and last year we got funding for a pre-study phase. That was 1 year, where we sort of identify our challenges, key challenges, and also pilot areas in rare diseases and cancer. And then this year it has gone very rapidly through discussions with Vinnova and the Life Science Office. We sort of were discussing how to move this field forward. So we have, since this spring, a national steering board. I will show it soon, that governs the project. And also, as you have already heard now, we have got funding for our next, the implementation phase that starts today. And we'll go on for 2 years, and then hopefully we have a 10-year perspective with the Genomic Medicine Sweden. So what will we do? We have, during this pre-study phase, we have formed national reference groups that sort of is the national expertise in diagnostic treatment and also technical aspects in these 6 disease areas. We also have put a lot of effort we think that this is one of the most important part, the informatics, really, to how should we generate the data, how should we store it, how can we share it, etc. So this is a big activity within Genomic Medicine Sweden, and can we solve this? I think then we are really up and running. I should say that the national reference groups have written vision documents, what they want to do in the short term and in the long term, and what obstacles we have and how we should solve it. We also have, of course, ethical and legal groups, how we can share data and how the informed consent should be applied. Health economy. Every time I discuss with healthcare, they want to know how much this will cost and what will be the benefit for the patient, but also for healthcare. And of course, as was also alluded to, we need to educate. In Sweden, we are 49 clinical geneticists in total. Of course, it's a small country, but still, we will not be enough to train. So we have to come up with clever systems how we teach our colleagues. But this is the national infrastructure, but the real precision medicine will be at the 7 genomic medicine centers that are formed. You heard that Genomic Medicine Center Karolinska has been formed, and some of the others also, and hopefully next year all of them will be sort of initiated and started. So this should be sort of the hubs for the precision medicine. So I mean, they do the sequencing, the technical part, but the most important is these teams that interpret the data and sort of transform this into real precision medicine. And also they can be hubs for inclusion of clinical studies. In Sweden, Genomic Medicine Sweden is within healthcare in close collaboration, of course, with the medical faculty. So this is the Genomic Medicine Center Karolinska, and we mirror the national level and have reference groups within our Genomic Medicine Center. And it's a joint effort between SciLife Lab, Karolinska Institute, and Karolinska University Hospital. So this is probably a little bit boring, but I just wanted to show how we are organized. We have the National Steering Board, which consists of 7 deans of the medical faculties and 7 research directors at the university hospitals, plus 2 industry representatives for biotech and pharma, and we also would like to have patient representation in this group. And then we have a management group, which I'm leading, that have members from the regional genomic medicine centers, and also the work packages for the different diagnostic areas, and also the more technical work package and LC work packages. So this is what we are setting up now. And as you have already shown, what will we do? We have the sort of our idea is that we will do broad sequencing. You have heard Anna that we will look at the known disease genes and then the remaining will go for research. And this also is the same for cancer. We will do broad gene panels or even whole exome, whole genome, but we will filter the data strictly and only report back the actionable findings. So for cancer sequencing, we have set up, as I alluded to, both for leukemias and solid tumors, smaller gene panels. Right now, as we speak, we are developing national panels for cancer and leukemias. We have just ordered a myeloid leukemia panel that we have agreed all centers in Sweden to use. And we are also actually following Anna's footstep, and we are now implementing whole genome sequencing for leukemia diagnostics, which has the potential to really capture all different important aberrations that we need in order to risk stratify patients with leukemias. And we are also very lucky in Sweden that the Swedish Childhood Cancer Society has spoken out that they want to fund that we do whole genome sequencing on all cases of pediatric cancer. And I just want to finish off by a case. This was a boy, 16-month-old, that got neuroblastoma. He received the current treatment, or the sort of standard therapy, and he got a relapse, and they didn't know exactly what they should treat him with. So they did a whole genome sequencing on him. When you do whole genome sequencing, you can, of course, look at the copy number aberrations, translocations, and in this case, it's perhaps difficult to see. There was an ALK mutation, and he could be treated off-label with an ALK inhibitor, and he's still in remission and is now 5-year-old. And I think this is a good, this really shows, similar to Anna, that we can really change medicine and how we treat and how patients using these new technologies. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Richard. I know that we're running late, but actually we started 10 minutes late, and I promised these speakers that we should have at least 10 minutes for, questions and so on. But I'm actually going to start by asking you, so as you can see, the title of this conference is Personalized Medicine in Action. And we have seen very good examples on this here today from you. But let's assume that we would change the year from 2018 to 2024, and you would ask, you could wish something. What would you wish for? Where are we in 6 years if you could sort of have power over this? So we had a magic wand and you could, say something. So, Anna, what do you think?
Well, I can answer this way. My biggest problem, and what limits me very much, is working across all these silos and these administrative systems. So I head a center, and most of my time is struggling to be able to communicate with the pediatricians and get them into the team, and where should I put this money, what should I do with that? And I cannot make any long-term plans because I work in so many different systems. So an organization that supports this way of working, so I could focus more on expanding and recruiting and scaling up. And also healthcare is struggling very much in Sweden. It's very fragmented, and we are in healthcare, and that's where we want to be. But there's no real easy way for me to support that with the sort of governmental funding that goes into doing genomes, and that is what we need. And that is really a very, very big bottleneck. So an organization where really academic medicine, where everything is put together like the way we actually work, but we do it across the system and not with support from the system. It's difficult.
So Jenni, if you're still in charge of the Life Science Office in 6 years, is this a promise or is this according to your plans?
Now, I could make a wish also, right? It doesn't have to be realistic at all, right? So then in 6 years, which is quite a long time, if Europe is really leading the personalized medicine trend and transition, we have a policy framework that is also leading the policy development of the regulatory framework that can encompass what Anna is talking about. So we have the funding is also working together with the framework conditions where we can actually deal with the difficult ethical and reimbursement and security and integrity issues that we're facing now. But instead of just feeling that Europe is always the one dragging behind, we're the one that really are leading the policy developing edge.
And Richard, if you could comment on your initiative is just starting. It's quite impressive already, but you're expanding.
Yeah, I think that a very important part, which I don't know the answer for, is that this initiative is for academia, healthcare, and industry. And we are now discussing with branch organizations in Sweden how should we work together in this field. And I think at least in Sweden we are lacking a good framework how we can interact and sort of work together. And I think it must be a very close collaboration, because otherwise, if we are generating all this sort of diagnostics, we need to have a close collaboration with the industry, really to get, of course, access to drugs and to learn from what we are treating and sort of feed back into the system. So I hope that, I don't know about other European countries, but in Sweden we have no tradition of how you can do a joint unit with the industry.
Sounds like you are the next Joachim.
I was thinking so. So in 6 years, let's assume the GMCs are fully functioning, every patient is sequenced, we find commonalities amongst diseases which we think right now are not connected, and we can redeploy drugs depending on the mechanistic understanding of the disease that we have, and you get almost like a continuously learning healthcare system where we work across boundaries and we don't have these, I would say, silos anymore, and where we also make it seamless and cut down innovation cycles and bring new medicines to patients faster.
Okay, so Fabian and Sebastian, I mean, you represent the patient perspective here, and we all talk about patient engagement, and we talk about engaging patients from research, designing research projects to implement results. What are your wishes? How shall this come true?
Well, it depends if I'm supposed to answer as a patient or as a patient innovator. They're two different things.
So you can have two wishes then.
Yeah. Well, I think from a patient's innovator point of view, I can just talk from my own experiences or from our own experiences as a startup coming in with a solution to a problem that we think see fit. I mean, everybody here has talked about co-creation, and we're definitely very much in favor of that as well. I think the way forward is co-creation and also the ability, but there needs to be a climate as well to enable co-creation. It's pretty hard for, there needs to be incentives, there needs to be a mutually beneficial partnerships. And I think further pressure on creating a better climate for co-creation is definitely our wish. And we stand ready. Once we begin to scale this out, the platform will eventually begin to capture a lot of members, hopefully, that will be using our platform. Many of them will be patients, and by the ability to collect data from them and work together with them, we'll sit in a pretty unique situation. And we will stand ready to work together and kind of engage our platform into this ecosystem. But again, there needs to be an increased kind of understanding of how everybody should fit into the ecosystem.
And Sebastian.
Yeah, I wanted to say something smart. but everybody here is probably smarter than me, so I'm going to keep it short. I think it's important to just remember to always keep asking questions to patients what they want in that particular point in time. Because, I mean, tech and health tech is going forward, but unless we can take 2 blood samples of 2 people and tell with certainty if those 2 people will fall in love or not, I think it's important to ask patients what they want still.
Okay, thank you. So I want to thank you all. I'm not going to allow any questions. You can ask them questions during the coffee break because we are running late. So, but I would like to thank you all for excellent talks and for actually putting Sweden somehow, you know, in the front line when it comes to new initiatives and that things are happening in Sweden. So thank you very much.